Hi, everybody. Welcome to this session on how to apply for the California Small Business and Nonprofit Relief Grants. And so a couple of opening comments to make about this. So first of all, in the first set of funding rounds for this program, about 6,000 nonprofits were able to get grants totaling over $78 million. So that's a lot of nonprofits and that's a lot of dollars. And that tells you something about the scale of this program that makes a lot of other programs look very small. Now, California has just put into this program for both nonprofits and for-profit small businesses an additional $1.5 billion. Okay, so that means that there is a lot more money for people to be applying. And in fact, for arts and culture organizations which have a separate category, they actually had more money left over because they didn't have enough nonprofits in arts and culture apply in the first set of funds. So that gives us an indicator that this is not one of those things where, for every 100 people that apply, 3 get money, right? This is a program that it's really helping lots and lots of nonprofits. And so we at CalNonprofits, we are basically an advocacy alliance with more than 10,000 members, and helping nonprofits work with government more successfully is a lot of what we do. And one of the ways in which we work successfully with government, of course, is to get funding for nonprofits. So that's one of the reasons why this particular program, helping people access this program, is kind of in our sweet spot. And in addition to our advocacy and education work like this, we also, about 25,000 nonprofit staff get their health insurance through us. Members get discounts with HR services. And this is, of course, this fact that this program exists for nonprofits at all is an example of the benefits that we all get from advocacy, because this program started as being for-profit small businesses only. And it's because of what CalNonprofits and our allies in the legislature have been able to do that the program was opened up for nonprofit organizations. Now, I know that some of you have already applied and have gotten frustrated with that process and given up. And as others of you just heard about this program yesterday. And so don't worry, we're going to look at all of those kinds of things. But to help us know more about you, we're going to do a couple of polls. Okay, so, and the polls are going to work. There should be coming up on your screen. Great. Okay, so it's a little pop-up window there. And so you can, so if you go ahead, and there are 2 questions, okay? And for each of them, please answer. And while you answer, because I know that as nonprofit people, you're very good at multitasking. While you answer that, I'm also going to tell you a little bit about our 2 speakers, but I'm going to give you just a few seconds to go ahead and fill this out. Help us learn more about you. Excuse me. Okay, so while more of you continue to fill that out, and Henry, let me know when we have a good strong number of when entries start to tail off. Let me introduce our 2 speakers today, who are going to be kind of like a tag team, or a talk show host and an interview star or something like that. So one of them is Sue Sigler, and Sue is undoubtedly the world's top expert in how nonprofits can access this program. I know that's kind of a narrow field. It's not being like the world expert in biology, but nonetheless, she absolutely is. She answers the telephone in person. Okay, I want you to know that it's a real person. And in those first set of rounds, she actually communicated one-on-one with more than 2,000 nonprofits. So she is kind of unbelievable. And she also is such a powerhouse, kind of going to bat for nonprofits with Lendistry when there have been problems, just kind of going to the bat for people one-on-one. And she's really done so much. It's hard to kind of overstate what she's been able to do. And then our wonderful policy director is Lucy Salcido Carter. And along with our board, she is the leader of our policy work, which includes working with legislators, writing amicus briefs for the courts, and basically standing up for nonprofits in the policy arena. So, and just a reminder, we also had several hundred questions established earlier, so we will be trying to get to those as well as the live questions here. Okay, Henry, let's take a look at the results of the poll. See that more than 80% of the people have already participated. So let's see what they are telling us. So the first question is, first one is, yeah, tell us your application status. Okay, so most of the people here, 80%, have not applied. So welcome all of you. And I want to tell you the good news, which the application process is so much improved since last time. Okay, and other people are sort of starting or filled out the wrong one or selected. So thank you so much for those answers. That really helps us guide our session today. And then the second one, what kind of help would you most likely use? Maybe we can scroll down to that, Henry. We have to do that ourselves. Okay. Oh, it looks like you want all of these. Okay, so I do want to let you know that all of these are going to be available to you. Additional webinars, written FAQs, talking to an expert, that is to say Sue Sigler, by phone. And we can also provide individual help walking people through the application as you fill it out, because we know a lot of people are having difficulty with that, and in fact may be sort of unused to working with online forms anyway. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sue and Lucy. Take it away, you guys.
Thank you. As Jen mentioned, I'm Sue Sigler, and I work on the California Relief Grant Program for CalNonprofits, and Lucy Salcido Carter our policy director, will be monitoring the Q&A, and hopefully we'll get to absolutely all of your questions today, but there may be a few questions lingering after the end. If we don't get to your question, please do feel free to contact me, and my contact information will be up on the screen again before the end of the webinar. And we're going to start for just a few minutes to talk to folks who have already applied, who are current applicants. Maybe you're on the wait list, or maybe you placed an application in the past on the wrong form. But let me start with saying a very important announcement that does apply to everyone, which is that unfortunately there are fraudsters out there. And so we always want to draw everyone's attention to what is legitimately part of this program. Don't pay for anything. It costs you nothing to apply for any part of this program. The communications that you receive will come from the domain name of lendistry.com. And so if you receive something about the program from a different domain, that is likely fraudulent. And also Lendistry's website is careliefgrant.com. There are a couple out there that approximate that. It might say CA Relief Grants or .org. So please be aware of that, and always make sure that you're dealing with a legitimate source. Also, we just talked a moment ago about ways to get information about the program, and I want to be sure to direct everybody to our website that you see on the bottom of the slide there on the left, calnonprofits.org. You can click on our FAQs, or frequently asked questions, which is actually a complete guide for you to apply for the program, and then also to know how to work with your application once it's already been submitted. So with those FAQs, if you are a new applicant, they are designed so that once you've gathered your information and documents, you could run through that application online in under an hour. One of the questions I get frequently is, do I need a grant writer for this program? And it's important to remember that you do not. There is no narrative associated with this program. It is basically filling out your information, and it is not competitive with respect to the programs or services that you provide. Only if you meet the threshold qualifications, then you may be entitled to a grant. So the next couple of slides contain some very important and new information for current applicants. So please stay with us for just a moment. We can see that new funding rounds were announced in early August, and we are on rounds 7, 8, and 9. As Jan mentioned, there is over $1.5 billion available, and I want to touch for just a moment on what those rounds look like. Round 7, with $1 billion available, is happening now through September 16th. There are no new applications being accepted during round 7. There was an overwhelming response to the program, and so there are quite a number of people who are still on the waiting list from earlier rounds. The only round that's an exception to the waiting list is round 4, which was an arts and cultural round, and we're going to talk about that more in a moment. But if you were declined in round 4 and you met the basic qualifications for the program, but maybe weren't on the list of approved types of organizations for round 4, you do want to reapply in round 9. In round 8. Let's say that. Arts. So let's move on to round 8. $16 million available for arts selected qualifying arts and cultural organizations. And we're not going to go through that in detail today because it is available in the FAQs on the website. But let us say that there are a list of types of arts and cultural organizations that are available for round 8. And if you are nonprofit and you don't appear on that list, fear not, you can still apply in round 9. Round 9 has $500 million available, and the applications will be opening September 9th through the 30th. And we do anticipate that round 9 is going to be the last round of funding. And so if you are thinking about applying but have not done that yet, it would be important to get your application in during round 9. What will be happening during round 9 is new applicants can apply, and that's not just nonprofits, but small businesses as well. Waitlisted applications will continue to be processed. Round 8 applicants, if you are new to applying for the arts and culture grant in round 8, I do suggest that you also apply in round 9. And the reason for that is that you're unlikely to hear whether your application from round 8 was funded or not by the time round 9 concludes. So arts and cultural organizations, even if you are eligible for round 8, I do recommend that you also put in an application for round 9. And an insider's tip is anytime you submit more than one application, please use a different email address for each application. That is how Lendistry tracks through the system, their applications through the system. And I want to take a moment to land also on, there are quite a number of people. I saw that we have quite a number of folks with us today who might have applied using the wrong application form in an earlier round, particularly in rounds 1 and 2. It was a very easy thing to do based on the way that the portals displayed. And so you can reapply in round 9 if you were denied for using the wrong form in an earlier round. So please go ahead and do that. Just do be sure to use a different email address. And we'll note that the application portals have been redesigned, and there's also a pop-up added as you go through the application so that folks don't make that error again.
Sue,
with respect to choosing the wrong application. Sure can.
Hi, Sue, this is Lucy. What about other errors? We've got some questions about people who made errors in previous applications and were denied for other reasons, not just the fact that they submitted the wrong application, but maybe had other mistakes in it. Can they reapply in round 9?
I do recommend that you reapply in round 9. There's a couple of things that you can do before that, however. The first thing that I recommend is that you contact Lendistry, and we'll have that contact information on the slide later on. If you made an error and you were denied, the first thing you should do is contact Lendistry and ask if you can amend your application, depending on what your error was. If it was, you need to change the name of the applicant, there's a special form for that. If it's something minor, then perhaps they can just change that for you, but communicate with Lendistry first. I think we should talk a little bit about who Lendistry is too. We here at CalNonprofits are an application partner in the program. That means that our role is to answer your questions about the program and the application and to help you get your application submitted. Lendistry is the company that was chosen by the state of California to administer the program and to operate the website. CalNonprofits doesn't have any role in funding decisions, but we do play a large role in helping you get your application in. So thank you for that. And we ask everybody also to please tell others about this opportunity. There is a lot of funding available to go around, again, for nonprofits and small businesses, although we're focusing on nonprofits today. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Sue, a couple more questions that I think relate to this first slide. Just to be clear, people who have already received a grant through this particular program, they are no longer eligible to get a grant, right? In this
that is correct. There is only one grant through this program per organization. But I will clarify to say that many people have a small business and are also involved in nonprofit organizations. Any one individual can submit one nonprofit and one small business application, but you do need to use a different email address for each. And if you applied earlier and you are on the wait list, your application continues to automatically roll forward for each round until it is selected for review. And we'll talk more about what that means in a moment. But as we can see on our next slide, that
just one more, Sue, one more quick question. For if people have not heard and they applied in earlier rounds, I mean, you have been saying that if people are waitlisted, you know, they'll be considered in round 7. But what if they don't know? What should they do?
we're going to get to that in a little
good.
bit, Lucy. We're going to talk
Great.
about how to check your application status in just a moment. Okay, next slide, please. So as we were just talking about, you can only receive one grant from this program. Waitlisted applications automatically roll over to round 7 and 9. Arts and cultural organizations should visit our website at calnonprofits.org and check our FAQs to see if you are on the list of organizations that qualify for round 8. If you don't see yourself on the list for round 8, nothing to fear. You can still apply in round 9 if you're a nonprofit organization. I'll note also that once you have applied, as I mentioned a moment ago, Lendistry is the company that operates the website and the application system. And so CalNonprofits cannot check your application for you if you've already applied, but you can check your application by logging back in. And we're going to talk about what to look for on our next slide in just a moment. But the instructions for how to log in are also in the FAQs on our website. So if you don't remember your password or your link, that is available to you there. And once you log in, you will see a status message. All of the status messages are listed in the FAQs as well, so that you can quickly figure out where your application is in the process. And so I'll also mention that one of the terms that Lendistry uses that's a bit confusing for some applicants is to say selected. So when you log into your application, you might see that you've been selected. That does not mean you've been selected to receive a grant. That means that your application has been selected for processing. It will be the first time that there are human eyes on it. And if Lendistry has any questions at that time, or if there's any documents missing, they will contact you to ask for those. And once again, if you use the wrong application form in rounds 1 or 2, please do reapply in round 9. And if you are still on the waiting list, some people have been on the waiting list since the beginning of this year. It does not mean that your application is being ignored or won't be accepted. There was just an enormous response to the program. It's taking a very long time to go through hundreds of thousands of applications. Next slide, please. But if you did already apply in rounds 1 and 2, there's something very important I want you to check. As I mentioned, human eyes don't look at your application until it is selected for processing. So if your application status says that you are still on the waiting list, or then you definitely want to check to see that you filled out the right form of application. This is only for applicants from rounds 1 or 2, but it does apply to everyone. This is what a status message would look like. And when you log in, you'll see at the top, it says grant application. Under that says DIR, which is your application number. They all start with DIR. Underneath that is a message in blue, and it has a code. And you want to check if you were applied in rounds 1 and 2 and you're still on the wait list, you want to check and make sure that your code is appropriate to the application that you intended to submit it. So if you are a nonprofit organization, it should say CRGNPO. If you don't see that on your status message, you need to reapply in round, and you are a nonprofit organization, then you need to reapply in round 9. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, these are the list of status messages that you might see. and you might see something that says awaiting selection process or on the waiting list. There is one other status message that doesn't appear in the Lendistry materials. It may say not selected. If your application says not selected, that means that it's been reviewed, but you have not been approved for a grant, and you want to contact Lendistry directly about that to find out why. If you're having issues getting approved, please feel free to contact me. I'm happy to talk that through with you. A couple of other insider tips. You'll know that you got funded in your grant process because you'll receive a document via DocuSign. It is a grant agreement. The grant agreement is the last step in the application process. Once you sign that, then you will be moved into the funding. You'll be moved into process for funding and to receive your money. And people often ask me, how long will that take? And we honestly can't tell you. It varies because your financial institution might take a different amount of time than someone else's to receive and process those funds to your account. And also, Lendistry does reserve the right to send out funds through the end of the year, but we've seen them most often go out within 2 weeks. They don't typically send a notice, so you do need to watch your inbox for any email addresses you might have used I'm sorry, they don't typically send out notices, so you want to watch your bank account. Watch your bank account, because that's how you'll know when you got your money, is when it lands there. So next slide, please. I just want to review one more time. Who should apply in round 9? We've talked about round 7 is for waitlisted applications. No new applicants are being accepted. Round 8 is for qualifying nonprofit arts and cultural organizations only. In round 9, if you're already on the wait list, do not reapply. File an application in round 9 if you were denied for using the application form in a wrong application form in an earlier round, or you have checked your status and noticed that the code is not right. You see a small business code when you're a nonprofit or vice versa, then you should reapply in round 9. First-time applicants, welcome in round 9. And if you applied in round 8, but you have not yet heard about whether you're going to be funded or not, then you can go ahead and also submit in round 9, because round 8 applications will not carry over automatically to round 9. Next slide, please. Lucy, keep those questions coming. What have we got next?
You know, Sue, I think I'm going to hold further questions because we have so many new applicants, and I know that you're going to be getting to the eligibility requirements. We have a lot of questions about that. So I'll jump in as needed, but for now, I think it's helpful just to keep going.
Thank you. We'll do that then. Next slide, please. So back one, please. Sorry about that. There we go. So one of the things that I want to be sure to mention is that this program is very different from traditional nonprofit funding programs. Typically, we would sit there and develop a budget and figure out how much money we need, and then we would write a wonderful narrative about how much the community needs our services, and expect to be judged on the merits of that narrative and our need. This is a very different program. The amounts that you can apply for are preset, and you can see there it's based on your annual revenue as it is presented for your tax year 2019, and we'll get back to that in just a moment. But if you have to have a minimum of $1,000 revenue that you can show in 2019, and between 1,000 and 100,000, you are eligible for a $5,000 grant. Between 100,000 and 1 million, you are eligible for a $15,000 grant. And between 1 million and 2.5 million, you are eligible for a $25,000 grant. If you had income that was unusually high or low in that given year of 2019, please see our FAQs. That is addressed in there. But when you get to the application, you will need to select one of those amounts and fill it into the box. Let's talk also about expenses. We as nonprofits are used to saying it costs me this much to do my work, and so and being reimbursed on an expense basis. You are asked to retain your records on expenses for 3 years if you receive a grant. But you'll notice that there is not a one-to-one relationship between the amount that you receive and the actual expenses that you may have had during 2019 and 2020. And if you have questions about that, once again, please see our FAQs on our website because they do go into more detail about expenses and eligibility. Next slide, please. And speaking of eligibility, these are the basic eligibility criteria. Again, see our FAQs for a complete list of what you need to have, but let's review. For nonprofits, again, small businesses can also apply, but we're talking primarily about nonprofits today. Small businesses might cover either if you were a business with a physical location and a storefront, or if you're a rideshare driver, or if you have a food truck, or if you do childcare in your home, or if you are a contract employee and you get paid on a 1099. So all of those things are also eligible to apply, even though as a small business under the small business category. But today we are talking primarily about nonprofits. And so to be eligible, you need to be a 501c3, C6, or C19. And you may be a corporation, an unincorporated association, or a cooperative. A very strict requirement is that you must have your 2019 tax return. And we know that sometimes nonprofits get extensions and don't file right away after the conclusion of their fiscal year. And right now, we know that you will have, if you don't yet have your 2019 990 available, we know that there will be some more time to submit that, but we don't have the final date yet. So my best advice is if you don't have it available, you might want to think about it, getting it completed as quickly as you can. Your annual revenue, as we saw on the chart earlier, must be between 1,000 and 2.5 million in your tax year 2019. This program is not intended for startups and for new organizations. It is intended as a support program for organizations that had extraordinary expenses or were able to continue operating during COVID times. So you must show that you were in operation, irrespective of when you might have gotten your 501c3 tax exempt status. You had to have been providing services on or before June 1, 2019 and be able to show that. You have to have a physical address in California. If you're in a rural area that only uses PO boxes, please see our FAQs that is addressed in there. And you have to be currently open and providing services or have a clear idea of how you will be reopening once you are able to do that. The application will ask for comparison on your income. So you're going to be looking at a 6-month period in 2019 and a 6-month period in 2020. And again, that's detailed in the FAQs, but that's how they look at income to determine the need in your organization. Next slide, please.
So just very quickly, if it's a small nonprofit who submits a 990 postcard, what do they do?
Thank you, Lucy. Those organizations are eligible, but the 990 postcard does not detail your revenue. However, there are forms that you file with the state that do show your revenue. And so, and our FAQs talk about how have links so that you can get a hold of those forms real quickly. So the short answer is there's an extra piece of documentation if you file the 990 postcard instead of the longer forms.
Great, thank you.
Sure. So now we move on to who is not eligible. If you are a department of another organization, we typically see this in universities, and unfortunately, departments are not eligible, nor are fiscally sponsored organizations. Although if you are a fiscal sponsor, you can apply once for your own organization, but unfortunately not for the organizations that you sponsor. And the funds are generally not intended to support religious institutions. However, If the religious organization is involved in providing significant services to the community, think daycares or schools or youth programs, things like that, then they may potentially qualify. And we're not going to go over that fully today, but please look at our FAQs to see more information about that. Next slide, please. A couple of other important requirements. One of the things that I'll mention is that there is no paper application. So this is done completely online. And the person that you name as the applicant in your application, Lendistry prefers to see someone with the title of CEO or CFO, Chief Executive Officer, or Chief Financial Officer. However, that is not required. And you're not even required, in fact, to have staff. If you are, all volunteer organizations are absolutely eligible for the funds, but the one requirement is that the name of the person listed as the applicant must appear on the statement of information on file with the California Secretary of State. And if you don't know who's on your statement, or if you're not sure what that is, it's all quick and easy to find by looking through our FAQs. And once again, you have to have your 2019 Form 990 available to be able to have a complete application in order to be reviewed. Next slide, please. We also want to highlight for new applicants and for returning applicants, please make sure that you're using Google Chrome as your browser. The application will return errors if you are working in other browsers. And there are a number of other tech tips. I'm not going to linger on that today, but sometimes people find that the website isn't working quite right for you, and you can get through that with a list of about half a dozen tips that we've got in the FAQs on our website. Next slide, please. To begin your application, one of the things that we want, and there's no need once again to write all this down. It is in the FAQs on our website. When you first approach the web portal, you're going to be asked to choose a partner. There are a list of about 30 of them, of which CalNonprofits is one. You do not have to choose CalNonprofits as your partner. All of the partners have both of the nonprofit application and the small business application available on their web portals. And please do note that if you're applying in round 8, a qualifying arts and cultural organization, there is a unique application link for that. And once again, you can find that in our FAQs. But the first thing you want to do is simply gather your documents, your tax form, your articles of incorporation, that you will be asked to submit a valid government photo ID for the applicant to establish identity. They have some pretty stringent fraud prevention measures in place, and that is one of them. And then also something called the application certification form. The application certification form is available on the Lendistry website, and you can also find a link in the FAQs on our website. And it's a real easy form to just initial and sign. If applicable, you may need other income documentation. So the state RRF1 that is filed with the Attorney General's office is an acceptable form of other income documentation if you file the postcard, which doesn't list your income. And there's more discussion of this. What other types of documentation would be acceptable? That's on our FAQs. If you have a certificate of organization, a fictitious name registration, or a government issued business license, those are things that you may wish to supply as well, but not everybody has those. Next slide, please. Next, we move on to, you need to know your gross revenue that will be taken from your 990 if you file one of the longer forms. On the full 990, it's line 12 from 2019. On the 990 EZ, it's line 9. And as I mentioned a moment ago, it does not appear on the postcard, so you need a secondary type of documentation. And you'll also want to know how much revenue did you have during these 2 time periods. April 1 to September 30th in 2019 and April 1 to September 30th in 2020. You'll be asked to fill that in the fields on the application. And one of the common questions I get is, if I got assistance from other COVID relief programs. How do I treat that in the context of this application? When you are doing your gross revenue, do not include other government-sponsored COVID relief programs. That might be something like the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP. Another program is the EIDL, or your county or municipality may have COVID relief programs as well. You're not going to include that in your gross revenue because there's going to be a separate question about that on the application. It'll ask you to list how much you got and from the source. And if you were lucky enough to get several different sources, you may not have enough room on the application to list all that. So we advise you to go ahead and make a list on your own on a Word document you can upload with your other documents. Next slide, please.
So just to clarify, there is some confusion between the federal SBA Paycheck Protection Program and this state relief grant program. My understanding is that people who have gotten a loan through the federal Paycheck Protection Program can still apply to get a grant through this state program. Can you please?
Thank you, Lucy. That's a really good point. This program is unrelated to federal programs. Those are done by the US government. This is the state of California, also unrelated to local programs like your county or municipality. And this is a grant program. You do not need to pay these funds back. We've also gotten the question about, is there any tax liability? If you are a small business, there may be a tax, this may be taxable income to you. So you'd want to check that out with one of the small business partners. And moving on, we're going to start your application now and run quickly through how you fill that out. You want to choose your partner. As I mentioned first, you do not have to choose CalNonprofits to see a complete list. You can go to the Lendistry site at careliefgrant.com. We'll have that up on the slide in a bit. And all of the partners have all of the applications. Next slide, please. When you go to your portal, this is what it looks like. If you are a current applicant, you would fill in your email address and password on the right. But to start a new application, you're going to choose that box on the left that says click here to apply. Next slide, please. And then you'll see that you have more than one choice of application. If you are a nonprofit organization, please go to the one with the black bar that says Grant Program for Nonprofits. That's how to get yourself to the right form of application so that you don't get that pop up later on and have to start all over again on a different form. But once again, please remember round 8 has a qualifying arts and cultural organizations has a unique link, so please see our FAQs for that. Next slide, please. I also want to highlight that there are new accessibility and service features on the website. At the top of the first screen, you will see at the top accessibility, and there are features there for sight and hearing assistance, and then select a language. You can view this language now in other you can view the application now, in other languages. And the careliefgrant.com website also supports additional languages even beyond this one. So what I'm trying to say here is that these are the languages that you see on the screen that the application has been translated into. But if someone speaks a different language and needs additional assistance, you can find that on the careliefgrant.com website. Next slide, please. One of the other new features here that you'll see is every screen on the application has something at the top right called Watch Video. You can now see a video on how to, as you go through the application, how to fill out those questions. And if you look at that other red arrow in the bottom center of this screen, you will see that you'll see that it's not quite in the right place. It means to, that box above it says inputting 0% is satisfactory. That is what you would see if you hover on that little icon right above the arrow. So the question there is percent of ownership. Percent of ownership is a very confusing question for nonprofits because we know nonprofits don't have owners. And so next to questions that Lendistry thinks are, you might need a little more information in order to In order to complete, you can hover over the icon there and hopefully get the information that you need. You can also use our FAQs, which go through all of the questions. Next slide, please. Here we will see that there is a question that asks, do you fall into one of the 4 priority categories, and that's emergency food provision, housing stability, childcare, and workforce development. If you don't fall into one of those categories, you have to choose other. One of the questions I get most often to say, well, am I not going to qualify if I choose other? And the answer is you can still qualify if you choose other. There are some priorities for those categories, but you do not have to be among them in order to qualify for a grant. And on this page, you'll note that you're also going to need your employer identification or your EIN number, and you need to know the date that your organization or business was established. Next slide, please. One of the other things I really want to highlight, and again, please look at our FAQs as you're going through the application, because some of these questions really are difficult for nonprofits. They're not questions we're used to seeing on funding applications. And so sometimes you just have to choose the answer that you think is closest in order to be able to move through the application. And one of those has to do with employee counts. And so the question I often get is, do my contractors count as my employees? And so let's say I ran a youth program and I had an art teacher who works for us, several classes a week and gets paid as a contractor. The answer is no, do not count that person as an employee. And the reason is that that person counts as a small business owner and can apply on their own for a grant. And you should express your employees in terms of FTEs, which means full-time equivalents. So let's say that I had no full-time employees, but I had 2 employees who each work half-time. I would have 1 FTE because 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1. Next slide, please.
So given that applicants have to include this information, can organizations that are all volunteer apply for this grant?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lucy. You are not required to have employees in order to apply for this grant. And of course, that's different from the payroll protection program because it was specifically to underwrite payroll. So if you didn't have employees, you didn't qualify, but that's not the case here. And we can go to next slide. We talked already about grant amounts. And so here are a couple of other places we want to highlight some simple answers to questions that might be confusing for folks. You're asked, what is your customer base? Is it B2B, which stands for business to business, or is it B2C, which means business to consumer? Most nonprofits are business to consumer. And there might be a couple of other places here where the questions are confusing, where you might have to choose the category that says unknown. So if you get a pull down menu and you're like, none of those apply to me, it's okay to select unknown. And then the last thing I want to highlight from this page is that you're asked for something called a NAICS code. That's NAICS. That's that second arrow on the left there. And the NAICS code stands for the North American Industrial Code System, North American Industrial Code System. And every organization has a NAICS code. Larger nonprofits may have that showing on your 990, so check for that. But if you don't know your NAICS code, you can follow that arrow further to the right and you'll see click here to find your NAICS code. And if you still are confused by that in our FAQs, the US Census Bureau offers a service called Dr. NAICS, and they're pretty responsive by email and phone. You can call them up and talk it through and they'll help you figure out what your right code is. And that is particularly important if you are a nonprofit arts and cultural organization planning to apply in round 8, because only certain NAICS codes are acceptable for applications in round 8. Next slide, please. Some other frequently asked questions that we get. Again, this is that top arrow on the left is a rehash of the question earlier about do you fall into the priority categories. Moving down, this is the place that I mentioned that you will enter your income for the 6-month period in 2019 as well as 2020. And then that third arrow on the left will say is where you will enter any of the other government-sponsored COVID relief funds that you might have received. Next slide, please. And so this is where that arrow is. You will just type yes, and this is where you'll see the pop-up asking, did you mean to complete either a small business or a nonprofit application? If you find at that point that you're on the wrong form of application, you need to close out of everything and start all over again with the apply here button to get the right to the right application. I'll note that you will not have an opportunity to print out your work. And once you have submitted your application, you cannot go back and view your application again. So our best advice is, as you move through each screen on the application, if you'd like to save a record of your work, please take a screenshot. Next slide, please. And here we just want to highlight the submit button. The submit button means that you have, once you submit part 1, then you have made an on-time submission. Part 2 will be submitting your documents. So the process that happens is you hit submit. You have met the application deadline because you can go back and upload documents even after the application deadline. What you cannot do is go back and look at your application again. And so once you hit submit, you will receive an email from Lendistry. Please whitelist lendistry.com in your email box or on your server so that you make sure you don't miss your emails. Some people miss them because they don't see them when they go to junk or spam, so look there too. And you'll get an email from Lendistry with a temporary password. Please retain this email someplace you can find it, because the link is what you'll use to return back to your application whenever you want to log in and check your status or go upload additional documents. And so the email will be with a temporary password inviting you to go in and create your own password. And again, please retain that email. Next slide. Okay, what comes next? Like I said, you get that email. Now you can return to your application and upload your document. You will see on the left, there's a list of documents. You click on the correct one and upload your document. There's a 15 megabyte limit on documents. Some people have 990s that are longer than that. And in that case, you either need to compress your document or you need to separate it into 2 and label it parts A and B. Questions about that, please see our FAQs. And next slide, Lucy, do we have more questions?
We do. Can you clarify what is the cutoff point in terms of time for whether an organization meets that $2.5 million cap for revenue?
Yes, thank you. I can. That is 2019. Some people, it is not calendar year 2019, it is your fiscal year 2019. And so when you file your 990, it's going to say up on the top of it for the 2019 tax year. And that is the period of time that they are looking at. Let's also remember that round 8 does not have a cap. So qualifying arts and cultural organizations, round 8 is the only one that does not have an income cap at 2.5 million.
Thank you. That was a question that many people had, was whether the cap applied for arts and cultural institutions, and it does not. So that's good to know. What if an applicant has an incomplete application from a prior round and they really haven't gotten word? Should they contact Lendistry? Should they start a new application? Should they try to complete the application that they currently have in the pipeline?
Sure. We can talk about that. And Henry, would you go one slide further, please? And we'll just leave that list of resources up while we're talking about the questions. Thank you. So if you started an application, but you didn't finish it, the first thing that you want to do is log back into your application. If you don't remember how to do that, please see our FAQs on our website or look for that password email that I spoke about moments ago in your inbox. And see if you can log back into your application and check your status. If your status still allows you to complete the application, then you can go right ahead in there and complete it, bearing in mind that you would do this September 9th through the 30th. So when the applications are open again. If you cannot get back into your application or it says not selected, that's the time to contact Lendistry. And I'm not sure we've given their phone number yet. So anybody who needs to contact Lendistry, grab a pen. I'm going to say that the phone number is 888-612-4370. Lucy.
Okay, so in thinking about how to count employees, how do you count seasonal employees?
Oh, good question. I think that you would do your best. Let's say that do your best. What I would say about this question is a data point collection question. It is not necessarily a question that your application will be evaluated on. So, so seasonal employees, pick a point in time and make sure that you're doing the same point in time comparison for both of the questions that are asked. So for example, if you were saying, well, our high point is for seasonal employees might be in July, then make sure you're comparing July 2019 to July 2020.
Okay. And, you know, people are really anxious to be able to log on and apply in round 9. Can they do that now, or do they have to wait until that round opens?
I'm afraid that the application will not be available until the round opens on September 9th.
Okay, great. And let's see.
Let me say also, however, that we've got this slide up that also references the site at careliefgrant.com. There are a lot of resources there. There's a whole list of webinars for small businesses and nonprofit organizations. There are webinars happening almost every day of the week. There's a complete application guide. And our FAQs are designed to distill that down so that it's a little shorter and easier to digest. But there are videos on how to apply. There's language assistance. There's information about the partners that you can select. So we recommend checking that out there as well.
We also have a lot of questions about who qualifies as an arts and cultural institution. I know we didn't list all of those NACES codes for those, but where can people get more information about that?
Please go to our website at CalNonprofits.org and click on the FAQs. When you get to our website, you'll see the first article is about this program, and embedded in there in a couple different places are links to the FAQs. Just click there and you can, and on the front page, it'll say Arts and Cultural Organizations, skip to page X. And so you can get right there in just a couple of clicks.
Now, what about organizations that have been waitlisted who applied in previous rounds? Do they get any kind of priority for rounds 7 and 9?
Thank you. So every round is independent of every other round. So what they will do is they'll take the waitlisted applications and the new applications, and they all get considered together. So, so that application has an opportunity to be accepted in any round that is pulling applications off the wait list. And the ones that we're talking about today are 7, which is happening now, and 9, which is September 9th through the 30th.
Okay. And then we have a cultural institution that applied in round 4 with the incorrect NACES code. Should they start fresh in round 8?
They should. And you should use a different email address on that application from the one that you submitted in round 4. And do not include this with anything that you submit, but in nonprofit organizations, we have a lot of multi-services, or our services could change over time. Lendistry is used to working in businesses where NACES codes are fixed. So you may want to anticipate that question about how can you have a different NACES code now than you did in the spring, and I made an error is a fine answer. And I would tell that organization also to be sure to cover your bases by applying in round 9.
Okay, well, I see that we're running out of time, and I know that it's really important for people to know how they can follow up if they have further questions. So I think we're in good shape for now.
Thank you, Lucy. Next slide, please. I want to thank my colleagues, Lucy and Jan, who also are responsible for nonprofits qualifying for these funds in California. Have done a tremendous amount of work on this program. And so thank you very much. Jan, I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out.
Thanks, Sue. Do you guys all realize now what I mean by Sue's being the world's top expert on this program? I want to just thank the Chico Air Museum for submitting a question that we weren't able to get to. And that question is, what is the average velocity of a European sparrow carrying a coconut? So I just want to say we did get to a lot of questions, but not to all of them, including that one. But these other resources are, I'm hoping, will really helpful. And again, I just really want to urge people to take advantage of this. It just isn't often that this kind of program shows up. And so it's, you know, when we think about how much effort we put into saving a couple bucks, the effort put into applying for this is really important and worthwhile. So thank you for joining us. Thank you again to Sue and Lucy and to our off-camera team. And if you do get a grant, or even if you don't get a grant, please consider becoming a full member of CalNonprofits. Here's just some of the benefits that you get from that. And I wish I had a time to say shout out to so many old friends I see too in the chat line. So thanks to all of you. Thanks for giving me some good ideas for new kinds of ice cream that I haven't tried yet. And thanks to everybody, and have a good rest of your day.